Our Region's Business is sponsored by PNC for the achiever in you. Our Region's Business. Innovation, transformation, momentum. Improving our communities and driving technologies that will shape our region for generations. The collaboration that brings vitality, prosperity, and life to living. Stay with us for the coming half hour as we examine in depth our region's business. Now, here's your host, Bill Flanagan.
Today on Our Region's Business, why shale gas may bring a boom in manufacturing investment and jobs in America, and a big investment in energy research at the University of Pittsburgh. But first, taking the temperature of the global economy in the wake of the debt deal in Greece. What's the prospect for recession in Europe, and just what does all of this mean right here in our region? Bill Adams is Assistant Vice President and Senior International Economist with PNC Financial Services Group, a sponsor of Our Region's Business. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and welcome to Pittsburgh. You haven't been here all that long. Recruited here from China, I guess, yeah?
That's right. I moved to Pittsburgh from Beijing, China in July of last year.
All right, excellent. It's got to be an exciting time to be an international economist.
You have mixed feelings as an international economist when people are happy to talk to you, because generally it means that the global economy is in trouble. But
right, the phone starts ringing, you know there's trouble somewhere.
The best time to be an international economist is when there is news. So yes, we've been busy. I'll put it that way.
Well, let's talk about Greece, and of course, a lot of concern around the world that that's the first card that falls over and everything comes tumbling down. What's your take on what's happening there right now?
So we had a deal for Greece in the past week. The other European governments and the IMF collectively are giving another 130 billion euros to Greece, or 100 of it directly to the Greek government, 30 billion to the private sector who's invested in Greek government debt to encourage them to write off some of Greece's debts to them. The deal that we saw in the past week, I kind of give it a C+. It looks like it will allow Greece to continue to kind of muddle through.
Okay.
It's hard to say whether or not it will be considered a quote-unquote default by capital markets, which would have some implications for derivatives and kind of arcane financial contracts written about Greece's credit situation. But the high-level takeaway is it looks like Greece is going to be getting out of the headlines a bit after March. At least this issue of rolling over debt for Greece is going to be less of a problem.
So if Greece muddles, what does that mean to the rest of Europe?
Well, if you want to take a step back for a minute, last year, in the last 3 or 4 months of the year, people were worried about the European financial system collapsing because there was the Italian government, the Spanish government were just not able to sell bonds. They were not able to raise liquidity, cash to manage their day-to-day finances. Since November, we've had a new head of the European Central Bank. Who's provided much more cash, or provided cash much more readily to the European financial system, which then trickles on through to European governments. So the European debt crisis now is much less of an issue of can governments get access to funding, or will there be a sudden stop or a sudden default, and it's now much more about whether the political system in Europe can reform itself and hopefully at some point get to the point where the economy can start growing again and creating jobs.
Well, and what is the current state of the economy there? Is it recessionary? Is it in okay. Is it just stuck in neutral?
We're forecasting a recession for Europe, for the EuroZone as a whole in 2012. If you look at the field of what economists are saying for Europe, on average, people expect around a 0.5 point of GDP decline for the year of 2012. What that means qualitatively is a recession, not a super severe recession. So either a mild, quote-unquote mild recession, or quote-unquote moderate recession. But if you want to think of it in terms the average European person will be thinking of, really this is about do you have unemployment going up, or is the labor market okay? And if you look across Europe, with the exception of Germany, where unemployment is at a 20-year low, I mean, you wouldn't expect that in the midst of a crisis. They're having an amazing labor market. But with the exception of Germany, the rest of Europe has not really seen a recovery from the recession of 2009.
So it's going to feel like the ongoing recession is just ongoing to a lot of the folks who live there, right?
It's particularly in Italy and in Greece, but in Spain. Spain right now has recession at the levels 22%, 23% unemployment.
Wow.
That's as high as it was in the U.S. during the Great Depression.
Well, yeah, as high as it was here in Pittsburgh and in our region back in the early 1980s, as a matter of fact. Well, what does all this mean? If Europe tanks are a big trading partner, we do a lot of business with them, does that drag the United States into recession right along with them?
The good news is that the U.S. economy is on a solid expansionary path right now. PNC is forecasting around 2.4% GDP growth in 2012, and we've seen some very promising economic numbers come out in the last couple of weeks. That means that there's a bit of upside risk to our forecast. Things could be better than we expect. So if you're reading the Wall Street Journal or the other financial press these days, and you see a lot of really worrying commentary about Europe, you look around at the rest of the world and things look okay. China, India, Brazil are all sort of accelerating back to their to a solid growth rate after a slow end of 2011. So I think we're off to an okay year for the rest of the world outside of Europe.
So we can weather what's going on in Europe, essentially.
I think businesses in southwestern Pennsylvania that sell globally are not going to see demand growth out of Europe, obviously, in 2012. But I think there will be opportunities elsewhere in the world.
You mentioned Germany, and I know Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett's planning his first international business mission to Germany and France, I think at the end of March. A good time for him to be reaching out from Pennsylvania to Germany, given what's going on in their economy?
Well, Germany is part of Europe, so as Europe falls into recession, they're definitely being affected. The German economy contracted in the last quarter of 2011. But at the same time, Germany, they have the lowest unemployment they've had in 2 decades in Germany right now. Leading into this recession, they were in a very, very strong position. And the weak euro, the euro is off, I think, about 15-20% from last year. That is making German businesses very competitive. So there are a lot of businesses in Germany right now that sell globally, that are integrated in the global manufacturing supply chain, and they're continuing to do fairly well despite the problems of their neighbors.
All right. Well, fascinating time. I guess we're going to see a little more close hand with the governor going over there, and I think the Pittsburgh Symphony travels to Europe too in the fall. Bill Adams from PNC, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And next up, energies helped our region's economy outperform the national average in recent years, and a new investment in the University of Pittsburgh is fueling our leadership as a center of innovation in American energy. Stay with us.